I literally just got off a call with a buddy of mine, a younger guy. He's in college. He's very early on in his concealed carry journey, and he was asking me about weapon lights. And I see a lot of people with these questions. So I figured I would kind of share my thoughts, my experiences as they are up to this point, and kind of help to contextualize things because this kind of breaks down into two categories. You've got the gear piece, which everybody talks about, but there's also the software component and the situational considerations that I really feel are relevant for the civilian defender. And that's where I want to start. So if I can, I'm going to try and sort of superimpose a whiteboard up on the screen because I want to address the timeline of victim selection, encroachment, and ambush. There's going to be some assumptions here when you look at how the typical, violent street encounter unfolds that is not over ego, turf, etc. This is generally about how it goes. So you have your violent criminal actor who's looking to get paid. So what does that mean? That means that you've got someone that's posted up and they are surveying whatever their preferred hunting ground is, looking for food. It's generally done at some level of distance. Number one, so they've got a wider field of view, and also so that the potential targets that are being profiled are none the wiser that they're being watched. So if this is happening at distance, that suggests that there is at least some degree of ambient lighting to allow that visual information to be processed. Something to keep in mind. And so once a potential target has been identified, that is then where the encroachment, to use Craig Douglas's terminology, begins. Tom Givens talks about this in terms of coming out of a gas station and seeing somebody come up off the wall. That right there, that's a big red flag. So in order for them to victimize somebody, they need to be able to close distance with that person. This is where the opportunity begins to present itself for managing unknown contacts, again, pulling from the ShivWorks doctrine. And it is a combination of verbal and physical skills that allow you to fairly rapidly identify whether the person that is encroaching on you is going to be a problem or whether they are whether they're benign. And this is the stage where a light is potentially going to come into play. I've shared my story before about living in New Orleans, walking back to campus one day, and it was like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. Some dude tries to approach me, asking for money for the bus or whatever, and it wasn't even a light as powerful as this Surefire stiletto, but I didn't shine at his face. I illuminated him so I could see what was going on, and his hands flew up like I was pointing a shotgun at him. So it's very possible for a light alone to get you deselected. And at that point in the timeline, it's not really appropriate to bring a firearm into the equation. So at the bare minimum, the hand light is going to be priority number one. Now, the other software considerations of it are you've got to figure out at what point are you dropping the hand light and transitioning to the weapon light. The switching on the lights is going to come into play with all of that. And so the other real issue that I have that discourages me from putting a light on a carry gun is the fact that it is going to not only extend the learning curve of proficiency to where I'm not going to be nearly as proficient and effective with something like this as I will just with a standard, my standard carry gun, because number one, this is my standard shooting grip. And even with an arc switch, I may be able to turn that light on, but it's going to require that I modify my grip, and it's also adding additional steps into the drawn presentation to where, I'm having to override existing motor programs. So For me, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. And the other challenge of it is that lights on guns, because of how the base levels of the human brain work, have the potential, if it's not really aggressively and deeply trained in, to result in Rule 2 violations. Because, the other component of this is if you're talking about a static target, the draw to first hit kind of stuff, as you're coming out, cool, you turn the light on, bang, you get your hit. When it comes to actual defensive encounters, mercifully, I haven't been involved in one yet. When you go over to active self-protection and you look at how those unfold, there's a lot of movement, and it's typically in populated areas. And so the concern that I have, and this part is theory, I'm going to run it by a few of my friends that are low-light instructors, is if you are trying to track a target using a weapon-mounted light, I would suspect that there's the potential for some fairly serious Rule 2 violations in that circumstance. So those are kind of the main software considerations of it. Looking at the hardware side of things, number one, you're talking about, another $100 to $150-ish for a light, depending on if you're going for like a TLR7 or a TLR1. You're looking at another $100 to $150 for a new holster. And then on top of that, you're talking about probably thousands of dollars when it comes to transportation, tuition, ammunition, lodging, and food for a good low-light class to teach you all of the best practices and appropriate techniques. And then on top of that, this one's kind of a sunk cost because you're going to be doing your practice anyway, but dedicated practice on low-light techniques that are going to be a much sort of narrower sliver of the pie that don't necessarily have quite as broad applicability. There was a local range that did some skill drills, and we did some low light stuff there. So I got to play around with some stuff. It wasn't formal, but it was very much kind of like fuck around and find out experimentation. And I realized a few things in that type of context. For me, personally, if I am shooting in a circumstance that necessitates a light, what I've found works best is simply one-handed shooting and and an index up here. The little tweak that I got from Eric Gelhaus was when you're shooting a dot, it works best to do kind of up, by the crown of your head as opposed to down by the jaw. So that way the light is shining over the optic, not through it, and you are less likely to wash out your dot. I already practiced shooting one-handed. I already know how to shoot one-handed. So this is already an established motor program for me. Admittedly, it's not one that I practice a ton, but I've got more reps in already on how to shoot like this than activating, trying to build my grip in order to activate a weapon light switch. Because yeah, this is still walking and chewing gum at the same time because I'm doing two different things with my hands, but they're also in two separate locations. So whatever I'm doing here to manipulate the light is not screwing with what's going on with the gun. Those are my thoughts. I'm never going to begrudge somebody carrying a light. It's like, cool. You know what? If you can afford it and you are not carrying a weapon light at the expense of other more useful tools, rock on. I genuinely do not care. I will say for people that are considering it, I really just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze because of all the reasons that I just stated. I think that there are considerably more important things to spend time, money, and effort on that are much more broadly useful when it comes to the context of the civilian defender and the defensive problems that we are more likely to encounter. Let me know what I missed, because, again, I know this is not my typical video. I really try not to go too hard into a lot of the skills and tactics stuff because that's not really my lane. But what is my lane is regular Earth people trying to incorporate defensive tools into their lifestyle. And I see a lot of people struggling to shoehorn optimal gear that the sort of, gun internet zeitgeist is adamant is what you need into their EDC, when it's not necessarily appropriate or contextual for their lifestyle. And so it's kind of playing on hard mode unnecessarily. I'm not saying don't do it. Again, everybody here is grown adults, spend your money and your time how you want. I'm just saying that for a lot of folks, it might not be worth the effort. So anyways, hope this was useful. Let me know your thoughts. Other than that, stay dangerous, stay sharp.